My name is Rachel Mitchell. I'm 38 years old, and to my family, I've always been the one who never quite lived up to her potential. The last time they saw me, I was 22 and freshly graduated from Boston College with a criminal justice degree nobody in my family thought was worth the paper it was printed on. While my younger sister Jessica was already interviewing with top law firms, I was sleeping on a futon in a Dorchester studio, working the night shift at a rundown gas station to make rent. That was 16 years ago. Tonight, everything is about to change. It's Jessica's rehearsal dinner, a glossy, champagne-soaked affair in a historic Cambridge hotel, the kind of place where the silverware is real and the floral centerpieces block half your view. The dining room buzzes with Boston's old money elite, lawyers, judges, finance executives, the mayor's cousin. My parents glow with pride, holding court at the head table. My father looks at home in his tux, and my mother, in navy silk, floats from guest to guest, never missing a chance to brag about Jessica's career or her fiancé's new partnership at a Beacon Hill firm. I hover near the bar, nursing a seltzer with lime, perfectly comfortable with my invisibility. I watch Jessica glide through the crowd, her laughter ringing out like a bell. She's always been dazzling, the golden child, the girl who never put a foot wrong. I'm happy for her, truly, but it's impossible not to notice the difference in the way people talk to her and the way they barely acknowledge me. Rachel. My cousin Brandon sidles up, his smile a mixture of nostalgia and condescension. Didn't expect you to make it all the way from Chicago. Still living in that little apartment near Wrigley? Still working, what was it, in social services? I give him a polite grin. Yeah, something like that. Chicago's home now. Before Brandon can reply, my Aunt Susan swoops in, cheeks flushed from white wine. Honey, you look good. Your mom said she was worried you'd miss the rehearsal, what with flights and everything. Her voice drops conspiratorially as she said you're still in that rental, but it's great you made it. You know, government jobs don't pay much, but at least you're stable, right? I just nod. Aunt Susan pats my arm, oblivious to the sting. And look at Jessica. We're all so proud. I'm used to this routine. To them, I'll always be a Rachel the underachiever, the one who needed bailing out after college, who bounced between jobs and never quite got it together. The truth is something none of them could imagine. I've been a cop with the Chicago Police Department for nearly 15 years. Patrol, then detective, then special assignments, undercover work, task forces, even the occasional consult with federal agencies. The department's given me more family than I ever had at home. But the police work, the commendations, the nights spent keeping peace in neighborhoods most of my family would never drive through, that's all invisible to them. They think social services because that's the easiest cover. My bosses, and sometimes even I, prefer it that way. Jessica beams at me from the head table, mouthing a thank you for coming. I give her a thumbs up. Despite everything, she's always been kind, a little distant, but genuinely caring in her way. We grew apart, not because of a fight, but because our lives forked in such different directions. While she built her life around rules, order, and expectation, I ran headlong into chaos, risk, and improvisation. Suddenly, my phone buzzes, a text with a vibration pattern I only use for emergencies. I excuse myself from Susan and Brandon, heading for the quiet corridor by the bathrooms. On my lock screen, a coded message flashes from my supervisor in Chicago. Urgent. A hair, midnight. Diplomatic detail. All hands. My heart skips. It means I'm needed for something big, something that won't make the news, but that could shape the lives of hundreds or thousands. It's not the first time I've gotten this kind of call, but the timing is perfect. My family thinks I can barely afford a ticket home, and here I am being called to brief with the Secret Service and protect a foreign embassy. I slip back into the ballroom as the speeches start. Dad tells a story about Jessica's first courtroom win. People laugh and clap. My mom dabs her eyes, overwhelmed with pride. I smile for the photos, keeping my secrets close. In a way, I feel relief. It's easier to be the disappointment than to try explaining my real life to people who never wanted to hear it anyway. Jessica finds me after dessert, pulling me aside. You okay? You look a little or tense. I squeeze her hand. Just tired. You know, city life. She hugs me, soft and sincere. I'm so glad you're here, Ratch. It means the world. And for a moment, I believe her. Little does she know, before dawn, I'll be halfway to Europe, putting my badge and training to work, not as the family failure, but as one of the women who keep the world safe from the shadows. I barely slept that night. After Jessica's rehearsal dinner, I returned to my cheap Cambridge hotel room, changed out of my dress and into jeans and a hoodie, and stared at the ceiling, waiting for the next message from Chicago. My suitcase was already packed. Years of police work had trained me to always be ready to move at a moment's notice. My phone buzzed again just after midnight. Flight booked. O'Hare Terminal 5, 6 a.m. Embassy contract. Dress business, carry badge. You'll be met at gate by federal detail. Smitty. Smitty was my sergeant, and when he called, you didn't ignore it. Especially when the words "e embassy contract, e and a federal detail" were in the same sentence. It was almost surreal. Just hours earlier, my family was whispering about whether I could afford the hotel, and now I was needed for something that could end up on the evening news if it went wrong. In the dark, my old doubts came creeping back. Maybe I really didn't belong at those linen-covered tables with the golden children. But as the sun crept through the blinds, those doubts burned away, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and purpose. I scribbled a quick note for Jessica, tucked it under her hotel door. I had to run. Work emergency. I love you. You're going to be an amazing bride. Ratch E. Then headed for Logan Airport. On the plane to Chicago, I replayed the family dinner in my mind. The way my cousin Brandon smirked about my apartment, the way Aunt Susan acted like a stability, it was the only thing worth having. My parents meant well, but their concern always had an edge. You know, you could always come home, find something safe. Maybe in City Hall, like your uncle, and my mom had whispered as we said goodbye. I nodded, but we both knew I was never coming home for good. By 9 a.m., I was standing in the chilly arrivals hall at O'Hare, badge clipped discreetly to my belt. I spotted the federal agent immediately. Tall, ex-military posture, government issue suit, sunglasses indoors. He strode over, checked my credentials, and handed me a folder marked confidential, U.S. Embassy Protocol. Detective Mitchell? That's me. We're moving fast. Your reputation precedes you, he said, his tone clipped. The State Department requested you personally. The threat level just escalated. Can you brief on the move? I wouldn't be here otherwise. Within 10 minutes, we were in a black SUV heading north. The agent, Ramirez, explained in low tones that a credible threat had been made against the Czech consulate in downtown Chicago, a group with international ties, plenty of resources, and a history of hitting us softer targets. The embassy event was high-profile, and the city's best would be working side by side with federal agents to keep everyone safe. My mind shifted to work mode, assessing exits, entry points, staff, previous threats, recent intelligence. It was a relief, honestly, to be in a world where what I knew and could do actually mattered. My family couldn't see me here, but if they had, I doubt they would have recognized me at all. As we pulled up to the consulate, I saw the crowds already gathering: diplomats, activists, curious locals, news crews setting up their lights. Inside, the embassy staff was tense but efficient. I ran through protocols with the head of security, mapped evacuation routes, checked comms with local police. Everything moved fast, like clockwork, and I was in my element. Around noon, the Secret Service detail arrived, bringing another layer of seriousness. We set up a joint command post in a small office overlooking the main lobby. I briefed the federal team, ran through scenarios, and assigned patrols. Ramirez gave me a rare, approving nod. "Glad you're on our side, Mitchell." By afternoon, the pressure built. Protesters gathered outside, and I could see from the windows that the crowd was getting restless. But inside, the event went on, ambassadors and dignitaries making small talk, unaware of how thin the line was between peace and chaos. My phone buzzed again, this time, a message from Jessica. "Hope everything is okay. Thinking of you. Can't wait for you to see my dress tomorrow. Love you, Jay." I stared at the screen, wishing I could reply with the truth. That her big sister was currently standing guard over diplomats and foreign officials, responsible for keeping them safe from a threat most people would never even hear about. But some truths are better left unsaid. By 5 p.m., the event was winding down. No major incidents. The federal team debriefed me, thanked me, and told me to expect a commendation letter if from the highest levels. I smiled, shook hands, and walked back into the cold Chicago dusk, alone, as always, but proud. As I rode the L back to my apartment, surrounded by strangers, I thought about how my two worlds would never truly meet. In Boston, I'd always be the girl who could barely afford rent. In Chicago, I was the cop they called when things got bad. Maybe I didn't fit neatly into anyone's expectations. Maybe that was the point. I slept only a few hours that night. Adrenaline and responsibility can do that to a cop. The embassy operation had gone off without a hitch, but my mind kept running through what ifs. That's part of the job, really, knowing that the difference between ordinary and disaster is usually one overlooked detail. My phone, always on vibrate, stayed close as I tried to rest, just in case Smitty or anyone else from the department needed me again. The next morning, I checked my messages. Jessica had sent a photo of her dress, hanging in her hotel room window, sunlight streaming through lace and satin. She'd added, "I wish you were here for brunch. Love you, Ratch." I replied with a quick, tomorrow is the big day. Can't wait to see you shine." The lie stung a little, but protecting her from my real world was something I'd gotten used to. After all, that's what big sisters do. It was Saturday, and Chicago was just waking up, a city of sirens and coffee, of L trains and never-ending construction. I'd barely made coffee when my cell buzzed again, this time with a number I didn't recognize. Instinctively, I tensed. You learn in this line of work that most surprises are bad ones. "Detective Mitchell," a voice said as soon as I answered. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Special Agent Carter," Secret Service. Sorry to call you at home. There's been a development. That got my attention. Go on. We need you at the federal building within the hour. Situations evolved. International implications. I can't discuss details over the phone, but your embassy work put you on the shortlist. Full credentials. Plain clothes. I scribbled a note from my neighbor to feed my cat. She was used to my sudden absences. Changed into a blazer and jeans, clipped my badge and firearm inside my bag, and was out the door in 15 minutes. The city flashed past in streaks of blue and grey as I made my way downtown, mentally running through every high-level protocol I knew. At the federal building, Carter met me at security. He was younger than I expected, all nerves and ambition, but with sharp eyes. You were impressive yesterday, Detective, he said, leading me to a secure conference room. We're not supposed to say this, but your department's reputation for handling big cases, let's just say it's well-earned. Inside, a cluster of federal and local agents were hunched over laptops and a digital map of the city. Carter briefed us quickly. A credible threat had been made against the consulate of a European ally, this time with a specific timeline. The president was due to arrive in Chicago in 48 hours for a public event. There was chatter about an attempt to embarrass the US on the global stage. We don't just need security, Carter explained. We need people who can think on their feet and blend in. You've got both. The meeting moved fast. Assignments, surveillance shifts, briefings on every possible scenario. I found myself leading a small team, mapping out routes and contingency plans, working side by side with people who, in another world, would never have looked twice at a Rachel from Boston. Here, my background, my instincts, my ability to spot trouble before it started were exactly what made me valuable. It wasn't until late afternoon, after back-to-back meetings, that I finally checked my phone. There were a dozen texts from my mother, Jessica, and Aunt Susan, all asking if I was coming to the family brunch. Mom wrote, "Your sister really wants you there. It would mean the world to us. Please try." I closed my eyes for a second, feeling the familiar tug, guilt, love, duty, and a splash of resentment. How do you explain to family that you're busy prepping to protect the president, not just skipping out because you don't care? I couldn't. So I texted, stuck at work. Sorry. I'll make it tonight for dinner if I can. Of course, I couldn't. That night, we ran an overnight operation, surveilling locations, checking equipment, going over every last detail. I watched the city's lights flicker from a surveillance van, radio pressed to my ear, feeling worlds away from the lives unfolding in ballrooms and brunches. The morning of Jessica's wedding arrived with my phone buzzing non-stop, photos of hair, makeup, the suite full of bridesmaids. My mom's texts grew more frantic. Will you be on time? Jessica is asking for you. I managed a quick call, hearing my sister's voice bright and anxious on the other end. I miss you, Ratch. You'll be here soon, right? I wouldn't miss it for the world. I lied, my chest aching. As I hung up, Carter appeared at my side. We're on in 15. You ready? I nodded, donning my earpiece, locking my game face in place. Let's get to work. For the next 12 hours, the city belonged to the detail. We tracked every movement, swept every location, shadowed the president's motorcade through crowded streets and into the heart of Chicago. When the event passed without incident, the relief was overwhelming. As the adrenaline faded and I watched the city lights come on, I finally allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, I could still catch the end of Jessica's big day. I made it to the wedding just as dusk fell over Boston, city lights blinking to life outside the stately old church. My clothes still smelled faintly of coffee and street dust from Chicago, but I changed into a simple blue dress and pinned my hair back in a rush in the taxi. I slipped into the sanctuary's back row during the final hymn, heart pounding from more than just the flight. Jessica didn't see me arrive, but my mother did, a look of profound relief and a flash of surprise crossing her face. I offered a wave, not trusting myself to cross the room just yet. It wasn't until after the ceremony, when the crowd spilled out onto the steps, that I found Jessica. She turned, her veil catching the last golden light, and saw me. For a moment she stood frozen, then ran and threw her arms around my neck, the bouquet nearly knocking off my glasses. "You made it." "I knew you would," as she whispered, squeezing me tight. There was so much I wanted to tell her, about the convere, the embassies, the narrow misses. Instead, I just hugged her back and said, "Yeah, I wouldn't miss your big day for anything, Jess." Our parents gathered us for family photos, my mother already teary with happiness. "You're here, Rachel." I was so worried. She fussed over me, smoothing my sleeves, checking my eyes as if searching for proof I hadn't been living a double life all these years. I let her, grateful for the rare tenderness. We spent the next hour in a blur of hugs, congratulations, and group photos. Even my father, usually reserved, pulled me in for a rare side hug. "Good to have you home." "Kiddo," he muttered. My cousins and aunts chimed in with their usual banter, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. At the reception, I found myself seated at a table with Jessica's friends from law school and a few of my old high school classmates. The conversation was light, full of wedding toasts and old stories. Someone asked what I'd been doing in Chicago, and I defaulted to the usual, police work, mostly. "Keeps me busy." They nodded politely, and the conversation drifted to easier topics. Still, a part of me felt the weight of everything I wasn't saying, the things I'd seen, the lives I protected, the secrets I carried for the job. For so long, it had been easier to let my family believe I was scraping by, just another civil servant lost in the system. But as the night wore on and I danced with Jessica to her favorite song, I started to wonder if that was fair. To them, or to myself. The band played on, and between songs, Jessica pulled me aside to the quiet of the hotel's terrace. "You seem different, Ratch. Are you okay?" I hesitated. "I've just had a crazy couple of days, that's all. Work stuff." She smiled, brushing a curl from her face. "I always thought you had a whole secret life. Mom worries, you know, but I've never been worried about you. I knew you'd be okay, no matter what." The urge to tell her everything rose in my throat, but I swallowed it. Some secrets protect more than just yourself. Back inside, the wedding shifted into high gear, laughter, cake, Jessica's friends spinning her around the dance floor. I watched, happy and wistful, sipping ginger ale and savoring the rare sense of belonging. Then, as the night drew on, a commotion near the hotel's entrance snapped me back to reality. A pair of men in suits moved with a purpose only cops or feds ever have, scanning the crowd, talking quietly to the staff. I recognized the posture instantly, and my stomach clenched. They spotted me before I could slip away. One of them approached, Special Agent Carter, from Chicago. He kept his voice low and respectful, but his presence was as subtle as a tornado. "Detective Mitchell," Sorry to interrupt, he said, showing his credentials to my father, who immediately bristled. We need to speak with you. There's a developing situation. Your expertise is required. A hush fell over our table. My father looked at me, confused. Rachel, what is this about? Are you in trouble? I met his eyes, then Jessica's, and shook my head. Nothing like that. Just our work. Carter continued, We apologize for the disruption, Mr. Mitchell. Detective Mitchell is one of the top specialists in her field. We're under orders from the Department of State. Jessica's eyes went wide. Specialist? Department of State? I could see the calculations in everyone's faces, puzzle pieces rearranging, assumptions crumbling. Carter turned to me. We need you at the command center. Now. It's a high-level briefing. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. I felt every eye on me, my family, friends, people who'd never imagined there was more to Rachel Mitchell than what they saw. I straightened my shoulders, offered Jessica one more hug, and said, I'm sorry. I'll call as soon as I can. Then, with Carter at my side, I left the ballroom. As we walked toward the waiting car, Carter whispered, Are you okay? I nodded, adrenaline beginning to surge. Let's go save the day. We drove into the Boston night, the city lights whirring past, my family's stunned faces lingering in my mind. For the first time, I wasn't hiding who I was. For the first time, they saw me, not just as the black sheep, but as someone strong enough to stand between danger and the world. The black SUV cut through Boston's empty streets, Carter filling me in on the crisis as we sped across the city. An encrypted message had come in. Chatter suggested a coordinated threat against a European embassy, this time in my own hometown. The Boston Police, FBI, and State Department needed someone who understood both the city's landscape and the mentality of those who made threats. That meant me. We reached the Regional Federal Command Center in record time. Inside, the tension was thick, agents hunched over laptops, radios crackling, maps pinned with color-coded notes. Carter introduced me to the lead FBI agent, Special Agent Hawkins, and the State Department's local head of security. I took in the situation quickly. The embassy staff were already on lockdown, the building surrounded by police and federal vehicles. There were calls to coordinate, how to evacuate without tipping off any would-be attackers, how to keep the press away, how to make sure the city didn't erupt in panic if word leaked out. I dove in without hesitation, delegating patrols, reviewing the embassy's blueprints, making calls to Boston PD officers I'd worked with years before. The room responded, even the feds listened. Years ago, I might have been nervous. Now, my focus was total. In moments like this, nothing else mattered. As the hours ticked by, updates poured in. The threat was credible. A name connected to previous incidents was reportedly in town, and chatter on the dark web spiked every hour. I coordinated with local detectives, requesting street cams pulled from neighborhoods around the embassy. By dawn, we had a likely vehicle and a pattern. As the morning sun rose over the city, the suspect's car was found abandoned by the river. Our team swept the area and caught a man fitting the description on foot, moving toward a commuter ferry. The operation was textbook. No shots fired, no casualties, just swift, decisive action. When the suspect was in custody and the embassy declared secure, I finally allowed myself to exhale. Only then did I glance at my phone, dozens of texts from my family. The wedding was winding down. There were messages from Jessica, my mother, even my father. Jessica, oh Rachel, what's going on? They said you left with the FBI. Mom, are you safe? Please let us know you're okay. Dad, I'm proud of you. Stay safe. Call when you can. For the first time, there was no hint of disappointment or worry about my choices, just concern and, maybe, a little awe. When my shift ended, Carter walked me out to the curb. The early city was coming alive. Delivery trucks, bakery smells, the harbor full of seagulls. Carter offered a rare smile. You saved a lot of people today. The team couldn't have done this without you, Mitchell. I shrugged, exhausted but grateful. Just doing my job. He handed me a plain envelope. There's a commendation letter inside. For your file. But I think the phone calls you'll get from DC will mean more. I thanked him, pocketed the letter, and finally dialed home. My mother answered on the first ring. Rachel. Oh my God, are you all right? I'm fine, Mom. Really? I'm sorry for all the secrecy. My job, it's always been about keeping people safe, even if that meant staying quiet. There was a long pause. We never understood, you know. We thought you were just lost. But last night, when the agent said you were a specialist, that they needed you, your father and I realized we never really knew what you did. I heard Jessica in the background, and she took the phone. Wretch, I'm so proud of you. I always was, even when I pretended not to care. I smiled, blinking away exhaustion. Thanks, Jess. You made a beautiful bride. I'm sorry I missed the dancing. She laughed. There'll be more weddings. Next time, you better bring your badge to the dance floor. After the calls, I found myself standing on a Boston sidewalk, the city awake and unaware of just how close it came to disaster. In my hands, the commendation letter felt heavier than any diploma or trophy I'd ever earned. I realized then that my family had finally seen the real me, not just Rachel, the black sheep, but Rachel, the protector, the officer who kept her city and her loved ones safe. For the first time in my life, I felt fully visible. Not just to the city or the agency, but to the people who mattered most. That afternoon, I finally made it back to my parents' house in the Boston suburbs. It was quiet, with sunlight filtering through the oak trees, the way it always had when I was a kid. For a moment, I stood on the porch, taking a breath before stepping inside, wondering if the new reality between me and my family would hold. The door opened before I could knock. My mother pulled me into a fierce hug. You're safe, as she said, her voice muffled in my shoulder. My father stood just behind her, awkward but clearly moved. You did good, Rachel. You did really good. Inside, the house buzzed with the tail end of wedding cleanup, leftover flowers, empty champagne bottles, suit jackets thrown over chairs. Jessica was curled on the sofa, veil tossed aside, eating wedding cake with her bare hands. She looked up and grinned, her eyes red but bright. Did you really leave the wedding with a bunch of federal agents? She teased. I dropped my duffel on the floor and collapsed beside her. Yeah. Sorry about the drama. She laughed and handed me a fork. You just wanted an excuse to skip the Macarena. It was easier than I expected, sitting there, cake in hand, my family waiting for the rest of the story. For years, I believed the gap between us was unbridgeable, that if they knew who I really was, it would only add distance. But in that messy living room, all pretense faded. We talked late into the evening. I told them what I could about working in Chicago, the embassy threat, the long nights on surveillance, and why I sometimes had to disappear at a moment's notice. I left out details, but I saw respect and curiosity where there used to be confusion or disappointment. My mother listened, sometimes wide-eyed, sometimes biting her lip. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" she finally asked. I looked at her, struggling to find the right words. "Because the job. It's not about glory, Mom. Most of it is just hard work, lots of waiting, and sometimes it's dangerous. I thought it was better for you to worry about rent and my apartment than to worry about whether I was safe." She nodded, tears brimming. "We just wanted to know you were okay. That you had people who cared about you." I smiled. "I do. I always did. Sometimes it's the people you work with who become your family, too." Jessica nudged me. "For what it's worth, I think it's badass. I had no idea you were living an action movie while I was arguing about prenuptial agreements." Dad grunted a laugh. "I knew you had more guts than anyone else in the family. You're just like your grandfather, you know." That caught me off guard. My grandfather had been a Boston firefighter, one of the city's old-school heroes. He never talked much about what he saw, but he'd carried himself with a quiet pride and a fierce sense of purpose. I realized that's what I'd been chasing all these years, a sense of belonging, not just in the department or on the street, but in my own family. For the next few days, I let myself just be Rachel, the daughter, the sister, the aunt. My cousin's toddler had instantly decided I was the coolest grown-up in the house after I taught her how to sneak cookies from the kitchen. No one pressed for details. My family seemed content just to have me home. The wedding's afterglow lingered, but something else took its place, an understanding that hadn't been there before. My mother bragged about my work with the city year to her friends, vague but proud. Dad asked questions about a tactics and a casework. And Jessica texted me articles about women in law enforcement, finishing each with, "A sound familiar?" Before I headed back to Chicago, my mother cornered me in the hallway. "You'll call if you need anything, even if it's just a talk?" "I promise," I said, hugging her again. She slipped something into my hand, a small silver badge my grandfather had kept on his dresser all his life. "He'd want you to have it. And so do I." On the flight home, badge in my pocket, I stared out at the clouds and felt lighter than I had in years. I knew my life would always be split between two worlds, danger and safety, chaos and calm. But maybe, just maybe, I could bring the best of both back to the people who loved me. Back in Chicago, life picked up its relentless pace. The city was never quiet, never gentle. There were new cases, new emergencies, more late nights spent chasing leads through rain-soaked streets and filling out paperwork under the harsh light of the precinct bullpen. But something inside me had shifted. Where I'd once felt like I was moving through life unseen, a part of me now felt anchored by the acceptance I'd finally found at home. My team at the department noticed the difference. I was more patient, quicker to laugh, slower to anger. The job was still hard, sometimes brutal, but I carried myself with a little more confidence. When my rookie partner, Officer Green, started struggling with the emotional fallout of her first shooting, I found myself sitting beside her on the curb, telling her about my own first time facing the unthinkable. "You're not alone," I told her, meaning it more than ever. Green asked me to mentor her, and I agreed. Soon, a few more rookies joined us for coffee after shifts. It started as informal advice, how to handle tough calls, how to keep your heart open without letting the world break it. Over time, it became something more, a kind of sisterhood, women in blue supporting one another in a city that didn't always make that easy. Meanwhile, my family kept reaching out. My mother called every Sunday, asking about the weather and whether I was eating enough. Dad sent me old news clippings about my grandfather's firehouse, underlining parts about bravery and a Mitchell grit. Jessica, newly back from her honeymoon, started inviting me to visit Boston more often. Sometimes, she'd forward stories about women detectives in the news, signing off, a paving the way, Ratch. For years, I'd compartmentalized my lives, keeping work and family separate for safety, for sanity, maybe out of habit. But now, something in me wanted to let those worlds overlap. I volunteered to speak at a career day at my cousin's middle school in Cambridge during a rare long weekend off. Standing in front of a room full of 12-year-olds, most of whom had only seen police in movies or on the news, I felt a familiar surge of nerves. But when I told them, I grew up just like you, right here in Massachusetts. I never thought I'd end up protecting presidents or tracking down threats in the city I love. But you never know where life might take you if you're willing to be brave. I saw their faces change. For some, a seed had been planted. Afterward, my cousin's daughter hugged me so tight I almost lost my breath. I want to be a cop when I grow up, she said. Or maybe a firefighter, like Grandpa. I ruffled her hair, my heart swelling. You can be anything, kid. Just promise to do it your way. That night, over dinner at Jessica's house, my family listened as I shared stories from the job. Sanitized, yes, but real. We laughed, sometimes teared up, and for once, nobody acted like I was an outsider. Jessica's husband even asked if I could help organize a charity run for first responders. We could use someone who knows how to herd cats, he joked, and everyone looked at me. On the flight back to Chicago, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. I still lived alone in my tiny apartment, still faced the risks of the job, still woke up some nights from dreams of sirens and danger. But the walls between my worlds were thinner now. The love I'd fought so hard to earn was finally mine, freely given. Back at the precinct, Officer Green made detective. She credited my mentorship during the ceremony, and the captain winked at me, saying, "You Mitchells, always raising the bar." That weekend, as I sipped coffee on my fire escape, I looked at the small silver badge my mother had given me, my grandfather's, and smiled. Maybe legacy wasn't about medals or making the news. Maybe it was about showing up, day after day, for the people who needed you. Maybe it was about letting yourself be truly seen. And maybe, I thought, it was about finally believing that you belonged, not just on the job, but in your own story. Fall settled over Chicago in bursts of golden light and crisp air. I found myself looking forward to things I used to overlook: long walks after shift, neighborhood block parties, Sunday video calls with my family. Even on the hardest days, there was a sense that I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something. My mentorship circle at the precinct kept growing. Officer Green, now Detective Green, helped lead the group. We met in the break room or at a cheap pizza place around the corner, sometimes swapping stories, sometimes talking about how to juggle the job with family or mental health or, for the rookies, just making rent. I watched them bond, lean on each other, and grow stronger together. It gave me hope for the department's future. In Boston, my parents bragged to their friends about our daughter, the cop from Chicago. The calls became less about worry and more about pride. Jessica and I fell into a rhythm of trading updates, her court victories, my case closures, her baby news she was expecting, my latest precinct prank. I became notorious for replacing the captain's coffee with decaf. We were sisters again, two different lives, finally meeting in the middle. One Saturday, Jessica invited me home for a family cookout, her first since the wedding. I made the drive east, badge and Chicago accent in tow, and found my old neighborhood changed but familiar. My mother had cooked enough food for an army. Dad grilled burgers, chatting with the neighbor kids about baseball and a back in my day. Jessica's husband set up games in the yard. During dinner, the talk turned to work. My uncle, a retired teacher, asked if police work was really as tough as it looked on TV. I hesitated, then said, it can be. But it's also about helping people on their worst days. It's about standing up for the right thing, even when it's messy or thankless. Jessica jumped in. Rach helped stop a threat to an embassy and worked a city detail for the president. She's kind of a big deal. She winked at me, and everyone laughed. After dessert, my mother pulled me aside and pressed something small and soft into my hand. I made this for you. It was a quilt, pieced together from old t-shirts, Boston PD, Chicago PD, family vacations, even one from my college days. You belong wherever you are, Rachel. Don't forget that. That night, after everyone had gone, I stood in my childhood bedroom, quilt wrapped around my shoulders, looking out at the dark, quiet street. The ache of being the black sheep had faded. In its place was something sturdier, acceptance, belonging, even love. Back in Chicago, things changed at the precinct, too. I was asked to help develop a new outreach program for girls interested in law enforcement. We launched a Blue Line Girls, ride-alongs, safety workshops, mock investigations. The first group was small but fierce. They asked hard questions. They wanted to know what it felt like to be scared, to be in charge, to help people for real. At the final session, a shy 7th grader lingered after everyone left. Detective Mitchell, do you think someone like me, someone who isn't brave, could ever do what you do? I knelt beside her. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to show up and do the right thing, even when you're scared. That's what real bravery looks like. She smiled, her eyes bright. I want to try. Driving home that night, I realized that was the lesson I'd spent years learning and relearning. Bravery isn't about the uniform or the title. It's about stepping into the unknown, over and over, whether you're chasing down leads, facing down your own family's expectations, or opening your heart to a new start. Autumn deepened, and my days were filled with little victories, an apology from a teen I'd once arrested, an email from the mayor thanking my team, a quiet moment with Green after a tough shift where we just sat in silence and watched the sun rise over the river. For the first time, I let myself want things, a home that felt truly mine, maybe even a dog, maybe someday a family. But most of all, I wanted to keep showing up, for my city, my family, and myself. And for the first time, I knew I could. Winter came to Chicago with snow flurries and bright city lights, transforming the streets into a mosaic of movement and memory. For the first time in years, I looked forward to the holidays, not just for a break from work, but for the warmth of being needed, wanted, and truly seen. At the precinct, our Blue Line Girls, a mentorship program, became a model for other districts. I watched some of our first participants sign up for police cadet classes, saw Detective Green blossom into a true leader, and helped train the next generation of women who'd someday wear the badge with pride. I started taking on more responsibility, offering to help with department wellness and community projects. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt right. Life at home took on new meaning, too. I adopted a scrappy rescue dog, Bailey, who demanded morning jogs along the lake and greeted me every day like I was a hero, even when my uniform was covered in coffee stains and dog hair. I started to decorate my apartment, framed photos from Boston, my grandfather's silver badge, the quilt my mother had made. Slowly, the space felt less like a crash pad and more like a sanctuary. Jessica gave birth to a healthy baby boy just before New Year's. I drove straight from a double shift to the hospital in Boston, still in uniform, barely awake but buzzing with excitement. When I walked into her room, she handed me the baby with a tired grin. "Meet your nephew, Detective. I expect you to teach him how to break the rules, just not too many." Our parents were there, too. My mother insisted on a group photo, 3 generations, side by side, with me holding the baby and Dad's old firefighter helmet propped on the hospital chair. For once, nobody needed to say anything. The pride, the love, the understanding, it was all there, plain as day. Afterward, Jessica and I took a quiet walk in the hospital hallway. "You know, for years I thought you were just running away from us," as she said, her voice soft. "Now I see you were running towards something, yourself, your purpose. I'm so glad you found it." I squeezed her hand. "Me too." The months flew by. Bailey and I developed our routines: coffee on the stoop, weekends exploring new parks, Sunday video calls with family. The precinct threw a surprise party when I made sergeant. My parents sent a cake from Boston and called me twice to make sure I was eating enough. One evening, as the sun set pink over Lake Michigan, I sat on my fire escape, thinking about everything that had changed. The girl who once hid in the shadows of family parties, afraid of not measuring up, was gone. In her place was a woman who'd saved lives, mentored others, and finally learned how to stand up for herself. I realized, sitting there with Bailey's head on my knee, that a home wasn't a place, it was a feeling. It was a quilt made of old memories, a badge passed down through generations, a family who finally understood, and a city that sometimes broke your heart but never let you go. The next morning, I found a letter in my mailbox, a thank you from one of my Blue Line girls, now set to join the police academy. Her words were simple but powerful. "You made me believe I could be brave. You showed me it's okay to be different. Thank you for never giving up on me, or yourself." I hung the letter on my fridge, right next to my sergeant stripes and the family photo from the hospital. There will always be challenges, hard calls, close calls, long nights. But I don't face them alone. Not anymore. Maybe that's the real legacy, not medals or headlines, but lives touched, bridges built, and the quiet pride of finally coming full circle. The black sheep became the protector. The outsider became the anchor. And the daughter who once felt invisible found her way home, not just to her family, but to herself. As the first stars blinked to life over the city, I whispered a silent promise: to keep showing up, to keep believing, to keep building a life full of courage and connection, one day at a time. Because that's what family, and legacy, and real bravery are all about.